Ausgabe von der Draft-Vorschau heute. Da geht es bei uns um die Wide Receiver. Evan, is it still safe to say that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the clear-cut number one receiver in this draft?
I think so, but we talked about this a little bit with the quarterbacks as well. It is a flavor thing to an extent. Malik Neighbors is more of that burner type of receiver, great acceleration, great build-up speed as well. So he's somebody that can really change the game with his explosiveness. So I get that some teams are going to look at that and say, I'd rather that than Marvin Harrison Jr., who's just that well-rounded, very, very difficult to find flaws in Harrison. When I was watching him on film, I think I had like 1 or 2 nitpicks about his entire game. You know, he's really got it all going for him. And, you know, I know everybody talks about his dad too and the bloodlines, but he's his own player. He's not anything like his dad, I wouldn't say. He is that prototypical outside receiver that can win on the vertical route tree, whether it's, you know, hitch, comeback, slant, go route, right? Like that's the way he's going to win. And he's a fantastic receiver. I think really the argument is more Marvin Harrison Jr. is kind of like a Devontae Adams and Malik Neighbors is kind of like a Tyreek Hill. And like which one would you rather build your offense around is what teams are talking about right now.
How realistic would you say it is that the Patriots don't take a quarterback at 3 and go with one of the guys you just mentioned?
I don't think it's super realistic because, you know, old school scouting would tell you that you don't start a rebuild as a 4-win team with a wide receiver. You build from the inside out. So you talk about offensive line, quarterback, left tackle obviously is one of the big ones, but you don't typically build an offense starting with the receiver. And the comparison that I always use is like building a house. If you're building a house, is the first thing that you buy, is it gonna be the granite countertops and the fancy stove and all that stuff? Or are you gonna lay the foundation of the house and build the structure first? So if you're gonna take the receiver, it's a little like you're putting the cart before the horse. You know, you don't have anybody to throw him the ball. You don't have an offensive line to protect for the guy throwing the ball. So how are you gonna get Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball as good as he is? So another comparison, just to be more practical, look at the New York Jets the last couple years with Garrett Wilson. All-world receiver, first-round guy, awesome player, but they don't have a quarterback that can get him the football, so they don't win very many games. That's the way that I view it with Marvin Harrison Jr. As talented as he is, unfortunately, the Patriots just aren't in a position that's great to take him.
So you would probably pass on a wide receiver at 3, but the Patriots also have pick number 34.
Yeah.
First pick in the second round or second pick in the second round. Would you see, or do you see them taking a wide receiver at that position or at that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible because this draft is extremely deep at the receiver position. I have 18 guys that I'm expecting to go in the top 100, and all of these guys can be instant impact players for the most part. So you talk about 34, this is where the fun begins, Jan, because there's just a million receivers that I could pull out of the hat and say, oh yeah, that's a good option. You know, we have all these people.
Top 3, 4, 34?
Yeah, so we have all these people that call into the shows and they're like, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? I'm like, yeah, sure, all of them. So my top 3 for 34. It's a good question. I love the Texas guys, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Not sure if both of them or either of them are going to be there. Might be an end of the first round type of picks, but I don't even hate, you know, you want to trade up 5 spots to sneak back into the first round and grab one of those guys. That would be really good. I also really love Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Explosive, 4.39 speed. I call him like a mini A.J. Brown. Not quite as big as A.J. Brown, but has similar skills where he's very, very difficult to cover man-to-man, and then also has the ball carrying skills of like a running back that can really carry the football. So I love Legette. I love all these guys though, honestly. There's a lot of good ones. Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson. I think all these guys can play. It's just more about where you want them to fit in, and do you really need that outside receiver, or can you play another slot receiver? But I would say Legette and A.D. Mitchell would be my top 2.
How do you see the signing or the not signing of wide receiver free agents affecting the draft? Because I feel like they need to get this right now.
Yeah.
The wide receiver position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's an overall effect on the NFL too, to an extent, because there's so many receivers that come through the draft every single year that are really talented players. So it's almost like, why would you pay a guy $30 million a year when you can draft somebody in the first or second round and get similar production out of that player? So when I look at the Patriots in free agency, they did go after Calvin Ridley. So I don't want to contradict ourselves and say they weren't trying to get anybody, because they wanted Calvin Ridley and they offered him a lot of money. But I think they looked at the rest of these receivers, you know, a Hollywood Brown, a Mike Williams, you know, some of these other guys that were in free agency, and just said, we have that talent in the draft. You know, that talent level, we can assure we're going to get somebody at 34 that could bring a similar skill set or bring a similar talent level to the table as like a Hollywood Brown. So in some respects, they went after the golden goose a little bit there with Calvin Ridley. They didn't get him, but I think that they looked at the draft then and said, all right, you know, the rest of this pool, we can probably find these guys on day 2.
Something that worries me a little is the Patriots kind of like the track record of drafting, developing wide receivers.
Are you saying it's not good? I mean,
yeah, well, that's my question to you. Like, how do you feel about it? Do you feel confident that if they get a guy early, they can actually like make something out of it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's definitely a chicken or the egg thing with the Patriots as well. Is it that these guys were not talented to begin with and the scouting was the problem, or was the development once they got here the problem? You know, you have guys like a Jacoby Myers who develops just fine in the Patriots system and ends up being a really good pro. So why did Jacoby Myers work out but N'Keal Harry didn't work out? You know, I think that's a big question for this regime that they have to ask of the old regime and the old way of doing things. I think the two things that give me optimism, though, is that it is a different offensive system that's going to be simpler. It's not going to have as many branches on the route tree and options and conversions like the old Patriots system did with McDaniels and O'Brien. And I think the other thing is that the Green Bay Packers have a decent track record of drafting receivers, and that's where Elliott Wolf comes from. So you look at their track record with, you know, Devontae Adams and all the receivers that have gone through Green Bay, and you say, well, if you stick to that grading system and that way of scouting receivers, then maybe it'll be a little bit better.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Evan. Vielen Dank euch fürs Zuschauen. Wir sehen uns demnächst wieder. Macht's gut.